Peace, everybody. My name is Reet Starwind. I am an author, an artist, an educator, and an activist. I work primarily in the Camden, New Jersey area, and I focus primarily in artist development and community relations and in generating new ideas and hoping to pass them along to all future creators. Hopes that maybe they get a leg up on all of their predecessors. What I have to share for you, what I have to share to you for this summit is a workshop that I put together some time back that I like to call the toolkit. Now, the toolkit isn't full of physical tools. The toolkit is artist development tools, things that could be essential not only to independent artists seeking to carve out their own path, but even to entrepreneurs and others who just seek to create their own fate. So, attached is some insight and some advice, things that I've gathered over my years of starting this career in this field. And I hope that this message makes it to whoever needs it and that it inspires you to go out there and build that opportunity that you've been dreaming of. What is the toolkit? The toolkit is an interactive workshop for self-starters, independent artists, and brand managers, old and new. Our goal is to equip more people with tips and insight foundational to creating their dream opportunity from the ground up. Camden's a place where things are built. This workshop is a place to get those tools. So a question I asked first to start the workshop is, what do you think of when you think of iconic brands and slogans? I'm sure a couple come to mind right away. I'm sure a few trickle in the more you think about it. Here in the presentation, I have a few. I have Just Do It, Nike. I have Because You're Worth It, L'Oreal. America Runs on Dunkin'. I remember when it was Dunkin' Donuts. It's just Dunkin' now. I'm loving it, McDonald's. I'm currently wearing a lesser known slogan from an MC and artist I look up to who teaches similar workshops. The shirt says Think Different. It's the name of one of his tracks. I mention this because ideas have the unique ability to penetrate across mediums, time, and space. And that if you can create something that gets absorbed into the cultural zeitgeist, it can take on a life far bigger than any individual action or creation that you can make. A second question that I ask is, what does it mean to you to be a professional artist or a business owner, etc.? What does that typical idea of success look like? First thing that comes to mind. In the workshop, I have a picture of a rapper, and he has on some necklace that's 80 times bigger than mine, and a house that says it's worth $4 million. And then in the next image, I have a picture of a young woman overseeing two children as they paint in what looks like a classroom. I mention this because so often we're conditioned to think that that first type of person is a professional artist, but the second kind of person isn't. And the truth of the matter is, so long as you're able to pursue art or whatever independent passion you have in a way that sustains your life and sustains you personally, you are a professional artist. I next ask, what does it mean to you to be a professional artist, a business owner, etc.? In case we need an extra take on that. The example that I included next has sports jerseys. The example that I included next has sports jerseys. I have a Sixers and a Lakers jersey here. Each of them have their own additional logos. There's Nike. The Sixers has Crypto.com. Lakers have Wish. And I expanded upon that example with one of a soccer player, denoting how much the player or the team makes from these different sponsorships, Kohler and Adidas and Chevrolet, for each season that they're in action. I mention that because a lot of times we think of ourselves as the bit player. Not to say that the players of our sports aren't what the sports operate on, But if we can think of our ideas as the brands that sponsor, right? Or even think about that relationship, think about brands that maybe we could collaborate with that could endorse us because we see a similarity in values. There's a lot of different ways to find your way to success. And I think it's important to this workshop to make sure your ideas around these things are malleable and that they're open to changing, because that's how you begin to build the opportunity that you're looking for. So, a little bit about me. I am the creator of a project called Dreamers Playlist. It is an animated series concept that is an action fantasy adventure story aimed at Black and Brown youth. I'm also the creative director of an organization called Watu Moja. Watu Moja is a Swahili phrase which means one people, and our work is centered around bringing together people of the African diaspora, no matter where they are on the planet. We work primarily in the community with projects like gardening, as well as hosting art showcases, giving the people in our community a place to show off their unique talents and network with each other. And in my day job, I am the project coordinator of a journalism outlet called Stories Invincible. We're all about telling restorative narratives about the city of Camden, stories that uplift people's spirits and inspire them to have faith in the city and the people that live there. I include after that a quick Google search of each of those organizations and entities, sometimes with my name included to narrow the search. But what I wanted to draw upon here is that you want to imagine your future Google search for the project or for the entity that you seek to offer to the world. You want to make sure that when people think of you and when they search for you, it's immediately on brand with the exact sort of work and the exact sort of energy you seek to give into the world. So there's an example from Watu Moja, one from Dreamers Playlist, and one from Stories Invincible. So the first tool in our toolkit is your brand identity. Your brand speaks for itself. Its voice can be heard in rooms you've yet to enter. In this section, we'll cover who are you, what are your skills, and who will your work serve. The best practice in any situation, personal or professional, is to always be true to oneself. To do so effectively, one must first know themselves. As obvious as this may sound, this is a key step that, if missed, can cause one to stumble the landing of making that great first impression. So, for who are you, I draw upon the Kwanzaa principle of Kuji Jakalia, self determination. It reminds us to define our name, to speak for, and to create for ourselves. The name that you give yourself as an artist or a brand or entity should carry this line of thought. After all, your name is going to be the first thing that someone hears, so you want to make sure it gives the energy and the impression that you're looking for. We cannot choose the circumstances of our birth, thus we must cherish our rebirth and our reintroduction into the world as our artist, as our pen name, etc. Another Kwanzaa principle, an African Adinkra symbol and word in Swahili, umoja, means unity. You can probably notice that its root and the name Watu Moja, which means one people. And so, in a really poetic way, you can't have Watu Moja without Umoja, in the same way that you can't have one people without this idea of unity. In the next slide, I have an example from the Muppets, and it's Kermit the Frog telling a friend, just because you haven't found your talent yet, it doesn't mean that you don't have one. For this portion, what are your skills? I say that we often associate skills with chart-topping, show-stopping talents. The etymology of the word ties back to its meaning of knowledge. While it isn't the only thing you can do, there is something that only you can do. And through that mix of your skill and your experience, you have something unique to offer to the world. As we discussed previously, the best practice is to remain true to yourself. Whether through college majors that don't interest them or lines of careers that don't engage them, many sacrifice their self of absorbing knowledge and experience that pays them but never playing to their particular talents. Through refusing that sacrifice in favor of building upon the pieces you have, things that can never be taken away from you, your creative career can begin in earnest. And following that example on who your work will serve, I talk about Sesame Street. Sesame Street's one of those programs that is so ubiquitous now that we probably never stop to consider where it comes from. But it was literally created by careful creators and writers that really went and did their research and made sure that they could try to represent the exact audience that they were going for. It's on public broadcasting, meaning that it's accessible to kids that may not have cable to watch the more big branded cartoons and shows like that. But knowing that, they made sure to show up with essential information that the characters exist in a neighborhood reminiscent of the ones where the kids watching may live, and that the neighborhood will be made up of different residents, much like those same neighborhoods, and that the kids can come there and learn essential knowledge that will help them grow. And the fact that so often people who have less get less is so common that we take it for granted. So I just will always love and respect and honor the fact that the creators of Sesame Street saw an opportunity there to solve that problem with a really creative solution. And it's been an essential part of so many people's childhoods and so many cultures ever since. The next tool in our toolkit is your vision statement. It's dangerous to go alone or unprepared. This section covers how you will present your idea: LLC, nonprofit, independent artist options, recruiting teammates, networking, social media, and using Fiverr. Now that we know who we are, we must figure out how to best present ourselves to others so that we must be so. Gonna retake that one. Now that we know who we are, we must figure out how to best present ourselves to others so that we may be most authentically seen. Understanding what our vision is opens us up to begin adding additional pieces needed to see that vision through to the end. So this section goes over the basics of the differences between an LLC, a nonprofit organization, or operating independently. Some general pros and cons and information around each entity include LLCs, which are the easiest to establish as the acronym stands for Limited Liability Company. A lot of the ownership and responsibility still goes into the owner's hands, so banks are more likely to hand these ones out because it's kind of like a high risk, high reward sort of situation that they're looking at. Though there are all sorts of organizations, including some here in Camden, that are all about supporting small businesses getting themselves off the ground. So if you'd like to go the LLC route, there are organizations and programming that can help you with some financial guidance and even some funding. Secondly, we have nonprofit organizations, which usually operate around humanitarian causes due to the fact that they often cannot be career. What's the phrase I'm looking for? Next up, we have nonprofit organizations, which usually center around humanitarian causes, things that work in education, things that deal with cultural and arts. Nonprofits operate in this space where the transaction of money is essential for operations, but is not ultimately the goal of the product being presented. A lot of times, spaces like a Camden Fireworks are there to give an artist an opportunity to exhibit and sell their wares, but also to make cultural statements about how the arts community of the city feels about the certain climates and certain topics that exist in the area. Nonprofits have the benefit of receiving copious amounts of fundings, often through grants. And while grants can be competitive, the more that you figure out your niche and figure out what audience you serve, the easier it is for you to find opportunities to continue to fund your work. The last I'll mention for now is independent artists, which often incorporate as LLCs or even start personal businesses, but they operate slightly differently, as instead of offering a product or a service, they're offering a person's identity. So there's certain factors that you have to consider, like your look, your voice, your presentation, that may independent artists often seek to. It's common for independent artists to operate as an LLC or even another form of small business, as opposed to a nonprofit, as nonprofits' goals are normally humanitarian causes, but an independent artist is normally seeking to sell or offer their art to the world. There are different things to consider when pushing yourself as an independent artist on this scale, as instead of having to think of the products and serving services and the branding that a traditional business may offer, an independent artist may have to consider their look, their style, their voice, their audience, their message. The next segment is about recruiting teammates. If I can talk. This next segment is about recruiting teammates and networking. Modern day hustle culture pushes the myth of completely self sufficient artist and entrepreneur. Not only is this inaccurate, but it stains the mind, the soul, and personal relationships, as it's out of alignment for how we function as creatures of community and society. If you want to go fast, you go alone. But if you want to go far, you go together. That's an African proverb. This is where being solid in your vision becomes crucial. Understanding what you bring to the table in pursuit of your goals makes it more clear what support and what additional roles you'll need in order to make sure your goals are accomplished. A lot of people don't know it, but there is a legendary collective of musicians that all were recording and jamming together around the same time. The Roots and Erica Badu, and as a result, the music they created in this era is legendary and still listened to this day. Because they all recognize that if we're all talented and we pour those talents into one another, what we can create is elevated than anything we try to create in competition with one another. Finding those teammates can be tricky. Thankfully, with the advent of social media, it can be a little quicker. I know a lot of people see hashtags online and may not know what they're for, but they can be a handy tool for finding independents that are looking for work. With Creating Dreamers playlist, I am the author and director of the story, but I was in need of character art. And through hashtags like just searching for character art itself, I was able to find my way to what I've now assembled into a team of illustrators that have brought the project to something it could never be with just by hand. If Instagram isn't quite your thing, if you're not really a social media person, or you prefer something that's a bit more structured and feels a bit more professional, there's a wonderful application called Fiverr. Fiverr is where all sorts of different kinds of creatives offer their services. I have musician friends of mine that have commissioned their album arts off of Fiverr, been able to find somebody whose style they admire, find a budget that works for them, and ultimately express and communicate a vision for something that they want to share. So definitely give Fiverr a try if you need to find people to add to your team. The next step takes us into mission planning. The first blip I have underneath mission planning is that long-term goals are often built on short-term goals. I may lose or gain some people in the room with this one, but there's a role-playing game called Pokemon that I played at a very early age. And in doing so, your character, who's also a child, is given the task of traveling across an entire country full of cities and different landscapes and caves and oceans and cruise ships and all sorts of stuff. And you're told that you're supposed to explore that world not only physically, but get familiar with its history and its customs, its cultures, its creatures. And it starts off as an exciting, albeit daunting task that over time becomes gradually easier. You see, the game marks your progression by your traveling through 8 major cities, each one introducing you to a different part of the world and challenging you in a different way. By the time you make it around the board and back to where you started at, that gigantic world of yours feels also small. And it's because it happened over time in smaller increments. What I'm getting at here is that a lot of times we want to try and go and conquer the mountain on day one. We think that if we can't have success the way that we think that we should have it immediately, that we failed. And the truth is, that simply isn't possible. We have to reframe our ideas of success. We have to think about life in gradual increments. We have to consider what it's like to plant a tree, and that sometimes the tree that we grow will only reach the height that we're looking for after it's no longer for us to tend to. And I think in doing so, we free ourselves from these unrealistic, these hurtful ideas of success that often draw some people from pursuing the things they believe in. It may not always look like what you've seen, but sometimes that's what creativity is, creating something that you never knew existed before. Before you know it, you'll be on top of the mountain. This last section to bring us to a close is all about finding funding. I've alluded to some of these things before, but I'll give a couple of examples before I let you guys go. The first are grants. If anyone is not familiar with a grant, it is a large chunk of money that you do not have to pay back. Organizations give these things out to pour into communities and to support them, and often to go out and search for new talents that they can add to their network. So sometimes even applying for a grant is a good look because it'll put you on the radar for arts curators and arts organizers in your community. The example I have here comes from the New Jersey Arts and Cultural Renewal Fund, which supports all sorts of wonderful projects here in the city of Camden and throughout the state of New Jersey. Be sure to look for grants in whatever field it is that you look for, whether that is acting, whether that is traditional art, performance art, music, writing. There are people out there looking to support the next great creator, and that very well could be you. The second option I've presented is crowdfunding. If you're not familiar, a crowdfund is something you put together as a limited time campaign that allows people to pour money directly into the platform that you're currently trying to launch. So you'll see people launch all sorts of things on here: inventions, short films, video games, comic books, businesses. A lot of times, what makes businesses started by people in higher tax brackets than those I'm likely speaking to right now possible is that they have a large amount of startup money that comes from their community of investors, of relatives, people that have the money in their disposal to give away. Us in communities like mine may not always have so much resources readily available, but if everybody pulls together what they do have to offer, you'd be amazed how far you can go. When launching Dreamers Playlist, we were able to raise $4,500, and that money went into everything we've created since then. The writing of the stories, the art prints that we've been able to sell, putting gas in the company car, creating assets, helping us expand our network by hiring more artists. It was all made possible through the loving support of those in my community. Major crowdfunding websites include Kickstarter and Indiegogo. My personal recommendation is Indiegogo, for they have this flexible funding option. Whereas on Kickstarter, you'll receive the money that your campaign raised only after you've reached your target goal. But Indiegogo will allow you the option to keep the funds that you've raised if you choose the flexible funding option. The last is about community events. Get involved in some community events. I promise you, your community will be happy to see you. Keep an eye out for flyers. Try places like neighborhood organizations and art galleries to see when things are happening. Come be a part as a participant, as a viewer, and then see if there's a space for you to share your wares. Maybe get on stage and sell your talents. I promise the world is a much more beautiful place when you share your gifts with it. And I hope that you find the confidence in the community around you to really pour these ideas out into reality with the support that is necessary to do so. And I hope that you understand a bit more about what it can feel like to build something from scratch. I'm sure a lot of people are expecting more tangible things, and we sure went over some tangible information in here. But more than anything, the toolkit is spiritual, mental preparation for you to go out there and carve out your own legacy. The tools are here at your disposal. I have a slideshow presentation that I use. You probably saw me swiveling my head to over here. That'll be available for you as well. I can also be reached if you have any questions about myself, the work that I do, or any of the projects that I'm a part of. I'm so thankful for you having me be a part of this experience, and I hope everybody continues to reach for and prosper. Take care. Peace.